Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have a brand new deck for you, but before that, just a quick reminder to please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed my videos. We're well on our way to 1 million subscribers and every single click counts. And today's deck is going to be centered around Butch Deloria, Tunnel Snake. For 1 colorless and 1 black, it's a legendary creature, human rogue 2/2 with Menace. This creature can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. Tunnel Snake's rule: whenever Butch Deloria Tunnel Snake attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each other rogue and or snake you control, and 1 colorless, 1 black, put a menace counter on another target creature. It becomes a rogue in addition to its other types. Now this guy was another one of those that kind of slipped by me during spoiler season, but it's such a cool card. It comes down really early, is difficult to block, and can get really big if you build your deck around it, which is exactly what we're going to try to be doing. Snakes and rogues are a bit weird to combine, so we're mostly going to be leaning into the rogue side of things, although it's also kind of cool that we can make our snakes and other utility creatures into rogues by paying 2 mana, which is also going to give them menace. That other ability on the card is actually quite strong because it means that it's going to be very difficult to consistently block our creatures once we have extra mana to sink into that. So this is going to be a low to the ground aggro deck that can often win through commander damage by virtue of Butch getting really big when he attacks. So without further ado, let's get started, and we're going to start out with Anti-Snitch. I really like this card. It gives me fond memories of when I used to play back in Lorwyn and Shadowmoor, and even though it's not the most powerful in Commander, it's really nice that we can keep recurring it as the game goes on. Black Bloom Rogue is an easy include because we want as many rogues as we can get, and this one can actually get quite big as well. Bloodline Pretender is going to work very well with the theme of our deck. We're obviously going to choose Rogue with this, and it should grow fairly big. Burakos Party Leader is very solid because it's almost always going to provide 2 treasures on attack, seeing as we're almost certainly going to have a rogue and he counts as everything. Changeling Outcast is great in any aggressive tribal deck, and this is no different. This can sneak in for damage, and we do have a few cards that care about dealing combat damage. Stealthy Voidwalker is an excellent card in Commander in general, but it just works so nicely in this deck by also being a rogue. Earwig Squad is really brutal if you can consistently activate its Prowl cost, which this deck can. We're basically going to lobotomize one of our opponent's decks by taking out their 3 best cards. If you're against certain combo decks, this can just stop them from winning the game altogether. It's very, very powerful in the right situation. Frogtosser Banneret is a nice aggressive creature that's going to reduce the cost of most of our creatures. Gix Yawgmoth Praetor is not a rogue, but it works really well in the deck with all of the creatures that are going to be sneaking in for damage. Gonti, Lord of Luxury, is just great to play mind games with your opponents and mess with their head. Grey Merchant of Asphodel is one of our finishers of choice. We are a mono black aggressive deck, so this should be good at closing out games. Guildsworn Prowler is a good card on offense or on defense. If it defends, we don't get to draw a card when it dies, but still, it's nice that it can dissuade attackers. Hagra Constrictor is our first snake in the deck. It's basically going to give menace to any creatures we have with +1/+1 counters on them. We do have a couple of cards that do that. Hooded Blightfang is pretty good because it can play defense or offense nicely, and we do have a few creatures with Death Touch in the deck, which means that we can get a bit of reach with this. Camber the Plunderer is quite a solid rogue. It's got lifelink, which is nice, and then we're going to gain a bit of life and get a blood token every time an opposing creature dies. Marry the Killing Quill fits very nicely in this deck. A little bit of incidental graveyard hate is always nice, and we do have a bunch of rogues to take advantage of the second ability and make some treasures and draw some cards. Marsh Flitter is there purely because it gives us 3 rogues for 1 card. It's very nice value with what our commander is doing. Metallic Mimic comes down nice and early, and then it's going to pump all of our other rogues as they enter the battlefield. Misfortune Teller is a little bit expensive, but the Death Touch works well with a couple of cards in the deck, and also the fact that we get to exile stuff from graveyard and make rogue tokens is really good. We can usually get at least 2 tokens off of this, which is very solid. It's also worth mentioning that we can make it a rogue and give it menace with our commander, meaning that it's less likely it dies in combat. Morgz's Marauder is an excellent finisher in this deck. Against people that aren't playing black, this can be an absolute blowout. Morbid Opportunist is a really solid card that's going to draw us cards very consistently throughout the game. Nizumi Informant is annoying. It comes down and gives us a nice 3-for-1 by making our opponents discard cards. Nighthawk Scavenger is a nice evasive threat that also happens to be a rogue, thus pumping our commander. Una's Blackguard is going to be one of the best cards in the deck. It's going to make all of our other rogues come in with an extra +1/+1 counter, and then every creature with a +1/+1 counter on it is going to cause our opponents to discard when they take combat damage from it. Ophiomancer is very solid. We actually don't have that many snakes in the deck, so a lot of time this is going to provide us a repeatable stream of 1/1 Death Touches, and since we have stuff like Skull Clamp in the deck, we can really take advantage of them. Rankle Master of Pranks is another great evasive rogue that comes with some very solid triggers. Ravenloft Adventurer is a nice card that provides some graveyard hate and the initiative. It's very unlikely that we complete a dungeon, but even without about that, we have a couple of ways to work with hit counters, so it's pretty solid. Shadow Alley Denizen is amazing in this deck. We're basically going to get to give stuff Intimidate whenever a black creature enters the battlefield, which means that we're going to be sneaking through for a lot of damage. Sivir's Nightmare Speaker always plays better than it looks. It can be pretty annoying for our opponents to deal with the life loss from this, seeing as we're an aggro deck. Skemfar's Shadow Sage is really solid because it can either gain us a bunch of life or drain all of our opponents for a bunch of life, whichever one we need. It's kind of like a mini Grey Merchant of Asphodel in this deck. Solemn Doomguard has a nice flying body, and then it provides us with some really good late game burst if we needed to. Soulcoil Viper is a snake, which works well with our commander, and then later on in the game we can exchange it for a card in our graveyard, giving us a nice little reanimation ability. Species Specialist is a really solid card. We get to choose Rogue and draw a bunch of cards whenever our creatures die. Stink Drinker Bandit may look pretty average, but it's incredibly solid if we get it down for its prowl cost. It's going to start buffing all of our rogues and making them very, very strong on attack. Stonecoil Serpent is a nice card that allows us to sink however much mana we want into it. It's great for rounding out our turns. Thieves Guild Enforcer is going to make our opponents mill quite a bit, at which point it's going to get fairly big. Varaggoth Bloodski Sire is a pretty solid rogue that allows us to search up cards if we need to. Zentrim Bandit is a nice aggressive rogue that can allow us to make some treasures, and Zulaport Cutthroat gives us a little bit of reach and makes it a little bit harder for our opponents to block us. Moving on to artifacts, we have Bontu's Monument, which is going to be amazing with all of the black creatures we're running. Cloak and Dagger is unbelievably good in this deck. We can just switch it around to whatever creature needs it the most, and of course it's very good with our commander because it means it's going to be difficult to kill him. Currency Converter is a little bit slow, but given enough time we can pump out some rogue tokens with it, which is very nice. Herald's Horn is going to reduce the cost of most of the rogues in our deck, which is obviously something we're interested in, and then it can also draw some cards now and then. Key to the City works very well with our commander because we definitely want to be getting through with him to kill players nice and quick. Obelisk of Erd can come down for very cheap if we needed to and provides a huge boost to our rogues. Skullclamp should draw us quite a few cards since we have a lot of low toughness creatures. And moving on to enchantments, we have Bad Moon, which buffs all of our team. This is a really sweet old card. Bitter Blossom is unbelievable in this deck because it's going to make a rogue every turn, and they're evasive rogues as well to boot. Black Market Connections is similarly very good because it makes repeatable rogue tokens, which we're interested in, as does Tribute to Hirobi. This actually makes 6 rogue tokens. If we even get a couple of them back after it flips to the other side, then it's been very worth it. For sorceries, we have Haunting Voyage, which can be really good if we foretold it by reanimating our entire graveyard. Nuclear Fallout is an interesting new one. We can actually sink a bunch of mana into it late game as a way to eventually finish off our opponents when they're low. Pact of the Serpent is incredibly efficient at drawing us a lot of cards. And for instance, I wanted to highlight Waste Management. It allows us to put the brakes at instant speed on opponents' reanimation shenanigans, and if we get rid of 2 creatures, we're getting 2/2 rogues out of it, which is pretty good for 3 mana. You can also just sink 7 mana into it at instant speed and get a bunch of rogues, which can actually be game winning in certain situations. And finally, moving on to lands, there's quite a lot to talk about here. We have Access Tunnel, which is very good since our commander has base power 2/2. Crypt of Agadeem should work well with all of the creatures we're running. It can often tap for quite a bit of mana late game. Escape Tunnel can search for a swamp, but also it's a one-off unblockable effect for our commander. Minas Morgul Dark Fortress can be great if we have extra mana to sink into it because it can start making our stuff unblockable. Rogue's Passage is of course excellent as a way to make our commander swing through to kill people quickly. Shizo Death Storehouse is yet another way to make our commander hard to block. And Tectonic Edge can deal with our opponent's problem lands. So there you have it. That has been my Butch Deloria Tunnel Snake deck tech. This is a really cool aggressive mono black deck, particularly since we don't really see many of those that are centered around rogues. I'll probably end up putting this together when I receive my Fallout decks, but I want to hear what you think. Do you think there are any cards I missed? Any cards you think I shouldn't have included? Let me know in the comment section below. I read all comments and respond to all of them too. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care.